The Terminator. Your future is in its hands.
Terminator was an idea that I had when I was in Rome. I was just sitting around basically in my hotel room. I was in fact sick at the time. I had real high fever. And I just laying on the bed thinking and came up with all this bizarre imagery. And I think also the idea that, you know, because I was in a foreign city by myself and I felt very sort of dissociated from humanity in general, it was very easy to project myself into these two characters from the future who were out of sync, out of time, out of place, you know, that sort of thing. I'd always wanted to do some sort of really definitive robot story because it really, you know, had really never been done. What did you think when you first got the script for T1? I mean, because they wanted you to read for the other guy, right? So you read it thinking about the other guy, or, you know, about Reese? Do you remember what you were thinking when you read it?
The more I read the script, the more I remember I got fascinated by the Terminator.
The bad guy.
The bad guy.
Right.
Which I thought was the real cool guy.
Your clothes. Give them to me.
What he loved was the story, and what he especially loved was everything that Terminator did.
We were talking about along the lines of me playing the heroic character.
Right, right. Because that's what I thought you were coming in for. And the funny thing was, when I went to that lunch, I didn't see that as you know, in the back of my mind, I was thinking the Terminator, you were thinking the Terminator, but we sit and we have this polite lunch because we've never met each other, and neither one of us mentions it, right? And then we both go back to our guys and say, Terminator, you know.
You then did something really smart. You sent over to my office your painting that you did of Terminator.
Right.
You impressed actually with my face on it.
Right.
And with the holding the 45 or like this across the chin like this. And I looked at this painting and I said, I am the Terminator. I'm going to make this call now.
Right.
And I called Lou,
right.
My agent, right away, and I called you and I said, I want to play the Terminator.
Yeah.
And then the deal was made.
What changed was that the original concept as written, and the script didn't change at all, not a single line of dialogue was changed, but the visual concept was that the Terminator was this anonymous character who could walk out of a crowd, just one face in the crowd, could walk up and kill you for no apparent reason except for what your life would mean in some future time. And that concept changed because Arnold doesn't vanish into a crowd. It took on a slightly more hyperbolic visual style. It is a little larger than life. It still played sort of realistically, but it became more nightmarish, and you always knew he wasn't quite human. Obviously, in order to get the intensity on the face to make you a killer, there's a fine line with having you be completely blank. So, you know, there was some sense of emotion isn't really the right word, but intention, I think. The fact that you were a killer, I don't want to say predator, but a predatory creature in a way, and very focused on your goal.
Sarah Connor?
Yes?
We really narrowed it down to just if this would be a robot,
right.
What movement would there be going
right.
on? And it would
right.
literally only be the arm coming across, pulling out, cocking, shooting.
Right.
No shoulder movement, no head movement.
Right.
Goes back, and then the whole body would turn and would walk away.
But with a smoothness too.
Oh yeah,
it was
totally.
It was like very positive and very smooth.
Right.
Not jerky either, because jerkiness wastes energy.
Right.
It was
absolutely.
like the ultimate efficiency, you know, to get, you know, the shortest path between 2 points. What I found to be effective, certainly on Terminator, was to do a slow motion build-up, or to subtly segue into slow motion where you almost don't realize it, and it becomes almost a dreamlike pace, or that dilation of time that you experience when you're in a traffic accident and it's happening and you can't stop it, and time seems to stretch. For me, the fun in that scene was the build-up. the latent tension of what is going to happen, knowing that one guy's armed, the other guy's armed, they're lurking around through the crowd, so all hell's going to break loose.
Come with me if you want to live.
Remember the first day we shot the scene where you're driving through the parking garage in the police car that you've stolen, and you're looking for them. And on that first day we got together and we talked a little bit, and we worked out some physical behavior like a shark, you know, kind of the way it moves back and forth looking for prey. And then you came up with the idea of moving your eyes, then moving your head to follow the eyes, then moving the eyes back and moving the head back. So it became almost like a surveillance camera. And the funny thing was, it didn't really get real to me until the next morning in dailies. And I saw that close-up and I went, this is working great. That nobody has ever seen this before.
I'll be back.
When writing I'll Be Back, I didn't think that that line would play funny at all, because you almost have to see the movie to know that he's coming through the door with the car. I figured that that would be a line for people who were seeing the film again, which obviously Terminator is one of those movies that people see over and over, so it works like that. But you know what? It worked even when people hadn't seen the movie before, because they could just guess what your version of coming back was going to be. You know what I mean? By that point, they were in sync with the picture, and the picture was working. In the first picture, you were so enthusiastic about the character and about the work. I mean, as you are in all your films, but I hadn't worked with you before, so I wasn't ready for this. That you just jumped in. I mean, there was stuff where we had you tied to the top of a car, holding on while the car raced backward down the alley with your arm on fire.
I think the worst moments were not really when I had to do something physically, like, you know, running through a window, or falling through a window, or landing on glass, or something like that, or being on top of a car. It was more the acid that was poured on me to make me smoke, to make the character smoke. I remember.
That's true. We did pour acid on you.
I kept saying, is there no other way?
Mild acid. It's a very mild acid.
Yeah, very mild. Is there no way that we can just put some smoke in there somewhere in the clothes that I can smoke, rather than having acid being poured on? With fire and acid and those kind of things, you never know.
Well, you know when that stuff starts to get around the face.
Exactly, too much, or in the eyes. You know, it burns a little bit.
I think that there was one major decision that was made that everything else sort of devolved from, which was made jointly between myself and Stan Winston when I approached him to do the you know, the makeup and prosthetic effects on the film. And that decision was to not do a man in a suit. We had to sell the idea that this was the suit that was inside the man.
All I remember was that I walked into Stan Winston's office, his building where he designed all the everything, you know, the Terminator look after you got through prepping him what it should look like. And all this, and he started making drawings and the makeup and design all this stuff. I remember walking in one time and he said to me, "This is what you're going to look like." And I looked at this, and I did not think it was humanly possible to create this kind of a makeup. With the cheekbones sticking out. I mean, there was mechanism underneath. The hydraulic mechanism underneath the cheeks. And when the meat is ripped off, when the teeth are sticking out on the side, when the mouth is gone, when the artificial eye, I mean, that lens is exposed and lights up red and all this stuff. When I saw that, I said to myself, that's impossible to do. And he looked at me, and when I told him that, he said to me, "It's possible, Arnold, but it would take hours and hours and hours and a lot of your patience."
Get out.
I tried to structure a script in such a way that it was not too highfalutin budget-wise. The executive producer begged us to write more of the scenes as daytime because of the perceived cost difference. But, you know, I plunged madly on. It seemed so important stylistically to keep the film a night film as much as possible. And so we kept it that way. And I don't think it really impacted the cost all that much.
The first one was really a struggle, especially when he came to make it, like you said, because there wasn't that much time available and that much money available.
Right, exactly. In fact, probably toward the end, we didn't even have anybody to put it on. It was, here, Arnold, put this on.
I know. We were going out on our own, shooting
right.
quickly a scene. You remember punching into the window?
We went out and stole shots. At the end, remember, we got a crew of like 3 people together and went out and did some close-ups of you.
You held the camera.
Yeah.
I had to put the special thing on it and take on my gloves, put my clothes on. There was no one from wardrobe there.
Right.
I had my clothes in the back in the trunk of the car, pulled it out, I put on the jacket of Terminator, and you said, quickly, quickly, before the police comes, walk across the street and just punch in the window. And then I say, okay, we're looking left and right. I put on the glove quickly, you know, and I put the gray jacket on and all this stuff.
Yeah, right.
And then you said, you went like this, and it was standing there with the camera behind the car.
Right.
I went there with the boom.
Yeah.
You know, says, okay, let's move on to the next location. This worked.
What was funny is that all of that, you know, kind of scrambling around to do that, it didn't occur to you to ask me, what do you mean punch in the window?
I know.
What do you mean punch in a glass window?
Exactly.
It's just like, do it, you know.
You still don't get it, do you? He'll find her. That's what he does. That's all he does!
And the other thing that's real important to me in a film is subjectivity, getting the audience to see what's happening the way the character sees it, as opposed to the way it's sort of sitting outside. And I like to try to, you know, force you to see it and feel it more the way they do within the frame. You can't step in there with them, but you know, hopefully the next best thing. It was primarily an aesthetic decision in the writing, which was to show these nightmarish glimpses as they were perceived subjectively by this character Reese, and then to take that and juxtapose it back and forth with you know, Sarah Connor and her sort of very normal, almost mundane life.
When you were casting, especially the female lead, which then became Linda Hamilton's part, I remember you were very interested in finding someone that fits a certain specification, a certain woman, and I think that's interesting. You were telling me that what you were looking for.
Are you saying it's from the future?
One possible future.
Then you're from the future too, is that right?
Right.
Right.
Well, it's interesting that we cast Linda, and she was right for the first picture, and she wasn't she had to have some strength, but when you first saw her, she had to seem to be kind of an everyday person and vulnerable, and the kind of person who was really almost a victim in a way.
Right.
And at the end, that strength emerges.
Move it, Reese! On your feet, soldier! On your feet!
First, she was this soft, nice, feminine girl that was working there in this restaurant,
right.
And you know, just having a great time, being one of those young girls that was out there having a good time. And then, as she became the victim, and as time went on, and she realized what her mission was, she became harder and harder.
Exactly.
And at the end, she was really tough. You really got the feeling this woman has changed, and she's ready to take on this challenge.
You're terminated.
Michael Biehn obviously did a fabulous job with Reese. There is a funny anecdote there, which is that Michael came in to read for us, and he gave the best reading of any of the actors that we'd seen, but it was with a Southern accent, we talked to his agent, very politely said, you know, Michael's very good, but we really don't want him to seem so specific that he comes from the South, because he's from the future. We don't want it to be that specific. And the agent said, what accent? He doesn't have a Southern accent. It turned out that he'd been reading for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof the morning, you know, that morning of the reading, and he hadn't shaken the accent.
Run, Sarah.
No.
Run!
So he gave another great reading minus the accent, and that's when we cast him.
I came across time for you, Sarah. I love you. I always have.
I always felt that this was more than the ordinary action film.
Right.
And it was more than a special effects film, and or like what some thought was just a B movie, and that it is only appealing to the kids between 14 and 18. This is not to be looked at as just a limited audience, a movie for limited audience, but in fact, I think the story is so solid and so good, and it has so many interesting messages there, and it is also entertaining, and so that it would have a broad appeal, that it would have an appeal towards for the women, it would have something for the older folks. It was just something that had something in there for everyone, and I think because of that, there was, after the movie was gone from the theaters, then when it came on television, it was 10 times as big, the ratings and how many people saw it. And then when the video came out, it was like a mushrooming effect there. And I think that's what eventually led to the belief that we must do a second Terminator.
It's funny that every year that went by that we didn't make the sequel, the demand for the sequel got greater.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know, that's why you and we got together periodically and started working on a plan and mapping out times to keep a certain time period blocked out so we can go and eventually down the line.
Actually, you'd call me up about once every 6 months and say, so how's it going on? No, you'd talk about other things for about 5 minutes and then, so how's Terminator 2 going?
That's right, yeah. So I mean, anyway, so that was, we were fortunate enough that it did come together and that we did make a second Terminator.
What did he just say?
He said there's a storm coming in.
I know.
Terminator 1 was like a hallucination for me. I was making my first picture. I had no idea it was really going to be a success. I mean, when I wrote it, I probably thought it stood the chance of being a success. I wrote it that way on purpose, you know, but you never really believe that it's going to happen or that it can happen. And so everything after that was like a dream for me for a while. And then I realized, yes, it did happen. This really did find its audience. And it gave me a lot of you know, courage as a filmmaker to go on and do other stuff.
I felt right from the beginning when I read the script and when I had my meeting with Jim Cameron that it was a winner. I felt it all the way through the shooting of the movie. Every time we prepared for a stunt, every time we did a scene, I was more and more convinced that we had a winner in our hands. And then when Jim showed me, after the shooting was completed, he showed to me some of the edited footage. And when I saw that, it was so intense and it was so well done that I just couldn't get enough of it. And it was really one of the first times that I could see rough cuts of a film and wanted to see more and more of it. So I believed all along that it's going to go through the roof. I was hoping and praying that the studio would believe the same thing and would support it 100%. And so I knew I was sitting on a gold mine.
We started off with the hunter-killer sequence first, Future War sequence. We first built a 3-foot platform which all the miniatures would be shot on. And in the background were cutouts of ruined cities, and in the foregrounds you had ruined buildings and skulls and things of that nature.
We forced the perspective a lot because to have the distance that appeared there, they have to have far larger stages in distance, so that the backgrounds were generally a smaller scale with cutouts, and usually foam core or cardboard in some cases, just to make the silhouettes for the backlight. The skulls that the HK rolls over were, you know, about this big. And also in some of those shots, we had a larger scale in the foreground, like shooting across a skull that was right in the foreground. Something I couldn't do with one of these little ones and still hold a depth of field.
Gene is master of forced perspective photography, and with a full-size human skull in the foreground and little skulls no further than a foot away, it gives it the illusion like there's a ton of them, first of all, but it's real skulls.
One of the problems with that is that you're in on many of those close shots were on wide lenses, that a lot of handheld work where I'd be in within 4, 5, 6 inches away from the models, shooting high speed at generally, I mean, anywhere from 80 to 120 frames a second. The sets were very hot. We had to have lights really pounding in there in order to maintain focus and depth of field so that it didn't appear to be miniatures. You had to have a real high light level.
When it came to building these hunter-killer tanks, we literally built them from the ground up, meaning that once the treads were finished, Then we'd go in and shoot those scenes, and then a portion of the body, we'd shoot those scenes, and then eventually the top section, and then the head was radio controlled. It had to be built in stages because there wasn't any time, and we had to start shooting right away because of a lot of scenes that required opticals, the lasers.
Jim had a vision of what he wanted the laser to look like, and not just a single line that glowed. He wanted them to have a lot of depth, complexity. He had a color that he was really working for. An awful lot had to go through an obstacle to put the lasers on. Most of the searchlights, though, were actually accomplished on set within the smoky environment we had.
Smoking up the stage was to hide basically the cutouts in the back, because the set was forced perspective. The entire depth of the set was approximately maybe 16, 18 feet. So we had to give it distance, and the way to do that is to create this atmospheric haze over the entire set to give it scale.
We used a lot of the cracker smoke, but also we were still occasionally using, when we needed it thicker, gum labanum, which is a bee smoker thing that you actually burn charcoal.
And if you're Catholic, you know what the smell smells like. We'd be sucking in this smoke every single day, and it was as hot as hell out there in Burbank during the summer. The grenade that goes underneath the tank treads was just a 2-inch little set piece, and to try and get it to go directly underneath the treads was a pain in the ass. I think we got it on the 26th take.
You wanted the explosions to have a lot of energy and punch.
The nucleus of an explosion is always usually a bright orangish look to it. What I added to this charge were 2 AG1 General Electric flash bulbs, and to create that orangey effect was a orange amber gel over the flash bulbs. I would have the flash bulbs go off first and then the explosion. And what I would do to create a fiery effect was to use, of all things, walnut dust. And walnut dust, once it's atomized, will create a fireball. The Flying HK wasn't also completely built. We built only one, and it was very rough at that. The detail was really on the undercarriage of it. So they had to make cutouts of like the pods on the side and put them on because they needed a shot right away with the Flying HK. So we got away with a couple of shots like that. One of the problems that I remember having was how to make it fly and not go back and forth kind of a thing as you're pulling it. So it was all on cables, it was all on piano wire that held it up, and we had wires that went off for the lights that are on the side of it also. We did a lot of scenes where halfway through the motor would slow down and then the whole thing would be jerking back and forth. We got through it. It turned out okay.
Most composites where principals, actors are in front of either miniatures or some type of effect are done with either front screen projection or rear screen, and both are employed in this.
Jim was a big advocate of rear screen also, so a lot of those scenes were accomplished first. Gene planned it out so that we knew exactly what he needed for the processing shots or the opticals that needed to go into it. Gene is a master at that sort of thing.
The tanker truck a sequence that blows up at the end was all done full miniature on a complete miniature set. There were no composites on that.
Jim Cameron originally wanted to blow a full-size tanker truck up, but he couldn't because where he was shooting it in downtown Los Angeles was in front of the police armory, meaning that they had all the guns and the ammunition and the police helicopters up on the roof of this building. So what Gene had to do was create the entire atmosphere in miniature, 1/6 scale, in the front parking lot of Fantasy 2 in Burbank, and then blow up a miniature tanker truck.
The end of the explosion had to match what had already been shot 10 days before in Principal, because since Principal was shot first, you had the wreckage of the truck on fire and burning, and so we had to blow it up and have it end up looking like the wreckage.
I have always had the philosophy of chain reaction, stretching out the scene. So when Michael Biehn puts in the pipe bomb at the back end of the tanker truck, I envisioned the explosion happening at the back end of the tanker truck, rushing towards the cab of the truck, instead of one giant explosion. There was a total of 42 separate explosions on the tanker truck. It created a terrific look. The first time we tried this, the gas was loaded, the bombs were loaded, the wiring was all done, the cameras are ready. We've got 3 cameras on it, and we're shooting 120 frames per second. Lights were ready, everything is ready. And what happened was the cable that was attached to the front axle pulled it so hard that it just ripped it out from underneath the cab. And there are the wheels, and I'd already started setting off the explosion, so I had to set it off the rest of the way.
Well, best laid plans, you know, you do everything you can to make something work right.
So I set off the rest of the charges. We put it out, and there was a collective groan amongst everybody on the set. So we then right away started working on another model, and 2 days later we got the shot. And to this day, there's a lot of people that still think that it's not a model that's only 1.5 feet high and 8 feet long.
We were submitted quite a few samples for possible composers for the film. And needless to say, when you come to music, that's where you literally have no money left.
They had a low-budget action picture. That's what it was billed as. So I was like, oh, okay. You know, it wasn't anything I was super excited about. And we had that sit-down talk where the filmmaker tells you, sometimes before he shows you his film, what he feels the film is about and what elements are in it. And I'd been through a lot of those talks, you know, the philosophy and the depth of it and the dream of the filmmaker. And then in many cases they show you the picture and you're sitting there going, where is that movie? Where's the movie they were talking about? You know, it's like, is it there? I don't see it. Oh, there's a little, I understand what he was talking about. There's a little, you know, they're talking about some big concept and there's this one little thing that relates to it, you know. So I sat down, and I must say I wasn't cynical, but I always was sort of, when, you know, Jim had a lot of big feelings about the film and passion for it, so when he spoke about it, it was very impressive, and I'm sort of, part of my brain's going, well, let's see, you know, and I'm watching the film, and, you know, 10 minutes in, I'm going, it's here. Wow, it's really here. What he's talking about is on the screen, you know, the depth of it and the mood and the energy of it and the intensity of it. And so I'm sitting going, I gotta do this, gotta do this. So we're watching the film and it's mattering more and more to me, and I'm really, you know, sort of feeling vulnerable, like, okay, now, you know, instead of being like, well, let's see, I'm going, oh, please, please, I hope you're gonna hire me for this movie. And there was a point, I guess, where he blows up and I go, if he gets up one more time, I'm leaving. I said it, I thought I was thinking it, and I said it out loud in the room. And then I'm sitting there thinking, I can't believe it. I can't believe I said that. I just lost the job. I just got very quiet and watched the rest of the film and figured, okay, well, that's it.
Brad really got the idea that this needed to have a percussive driving beat to go with the action of the film.
It was the idea of this mechanical man, in a sense, and his heartbeat.
He was great because he had no time, he had no money, and we were adding shots all the time in post-production as we'd get them in, and it didn't faze him a bit.
He did the whole score in his garage. It was a cool garage. I mean, he had a lot of good gear.
I had all these individual keyboards, and they had to be played individually. It was all live. Every note is live performed, with the exception of this. I had an Oberheim situation where I could put a little drum machine and a little those things were chained together, but it was their technology. It didn't interface with anything else. So if my Prophet 10 was going boom, 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 and the other thing was going I had to literally sit there live and change the tempo and try to get them to match. Part of the nature of the score is me trying to get control of the machines. While the machines are trying to get control of the people in the movie, I'm sitting here desperately trying to get control of these machines. When they finally get together in the police station, and he's now someone who had been like stalking her, they're now, you know, he's taking her and they're partners in a sense. And I thought, great, and they're escaping. Da-da-dum, dum, 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 you know, they're running out of the police station. And Jim heard that and he said, no way. He said, he said, that's going to open up a part of the brain of the audience that's sort of emotional and maybe a little intellectual, like, the theme, they're together, you know, it taps a little part of their, he said, I don't want to distract their synapses. I just want them like this, you know, I just want them to go, they're going to go, you know, so the music is the same, we just took the theme out, but underneath there was the running of it, you know, and the theme, I just thought, gave it this heroic moment, and he just said, no, no, and I think that in that awareness, he knew exactly why he didn't want the theme there. I hadn't worked with a director that had that level, that was dealing quite on that level.